10. Mariana Silva. When 20-year-old Mariana Silva was accused of illegally passing a Greyhound bus and sideswiping another vehicle in Washington, D.C. one afternoon in 2018, she decided against doing the right thing and owning up to her mistake. Instead, she grabbed her car jack and embarked on a campaign of violence. The bus driver confronted Silva, who allegedly responded by hitting the bus repeatedly with the jack and smashing the windows as the driver called 911. Portions of the shocking incident were captured on the video, including the moment the suspect tried to leave the scene. The driver tried to stand in her way, but she got past and took off in her car. Police soon caught up with Silva and charged her with assault with a dangerous weapon. Her defense lawyer claimed she was mentally ill, and the prosecutor accused the woman's family of letting her drive after going weeks without her medication. Silva's uncle, Seth, told NBC Washington he'd never seen his niece behave so erratically. He said he was stunned by the display, but acknowledged that Silva had been diagnosed with schizophrenia in the past. She was crying and appeared remorseful in court, but a judge ordered her to be held without bond while the case played out. 9. NANNATT WALDROP. A 37-year-old Alabama mother named NANNATT WALDROP made national headlines recently for allegedly boarding a school bus in the town of Centerpoint and assaulting a child. News quickly spread like wildfire after the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office charged Miss WALDROP with assault and accused her of confronting a student that she believed was bullying her own child. Even if the protective mother's kids was being teased by the child she came face to face with that morning, most adults understand that physical abuse is no way to handle the situation. The disturbing altercation was captured on video and shared on social media, leaving Miss WALDROP not only at the mercy of the justice system, but the court of public opinion as well. Besides third-degree assault, she was also charged with trespassing on a school bus and disorderly conduct, and was held on a $10,500 bond. 8. NIJAH Underwood. One morning in early 2018, two female students aged 14 and 15 years old got into a fistfight at their school bus stop in Lawrenceville, Georgia. Once the bus arrived, they moved their disagreement onto the vehicle. Instead of letting the teens sort it out themselves, one of the girls' mothers allegedly boarded the bus and struck the 14-year-old in the face. The parties were eventually separated, and the police were called to the scene. Footage of the assault soon began circulating on social media, and local authorities got a warrant for the woman's arrest. They charged 35-year-old NIJAH Underwood with simple battery for the physical abuse and disruption of public schools for delaying the bus along its morning route. But the teen girls weren't off the hook. Police charged the 14-year-old with battery because she allegedly visibly injured the other student's face, and they charged the 15-year-old with simple battery for her role in the fight. Both minors were released to their parents while Underwood was taken to the Gwinnett County Jail. Central Gwinnett High School released a statement informing parents of the altercation that had taken place and reminding concerned guardians that the district does not approve of violence and proper action was being taken. 7. Anthony Reyes. The internet recently went into a panic when footage of a man crashing a school bus into cars went viral on social media. It happened in Brooklyn after a man stole the bus and led police on a chase throughout the borough while recklessly smashing into many cars along the way. At one point early in the pursuit, officers tried to gain entry into the bus, but the suspect resisted. They tried to use a taser on him, but it didn't work, and the man sped off towards Queens while police tracked a GPS device that the bus was equipped with. He then crashed into a building and got stuck in a traffic jam, during which he hit several vehicles. By the time the police apprehended the suspect, he'd driven through several precincts. He was identified as 43-year-old Anthony Reyes and was charged with grand larceny, reckless endangerment, forgery, unauthorized use of a vehicle, criminal possession of stolen property, obstruction of governmental authority, resisting arrest, and leaving the scene of an accident with injury. Reyes had been arrested at least 12 times before, including for a robbery in 2017, and was on parole when he caught charges relating to the school bus theft. Witness Ali Suleiman Al-Mawari told the local station WABC that Reyes struck every single car on one block, and that if the police hadn't pulled one woman from her vehicle before he reached her, she would have died. Thankfully, there were no children on the bus during the terrifying ordeal, and the police officers involved only suffered minor injuries. 6. Bulgarian bus crash. Over 50 tourists were riding through Bulgaria on their way to North Macedonia after a trip to Turkey last year, when their bus crashed into a road barrier and exploded into flames. The deadly crash happened along the Struma motorway during the early morning hours near the village of Bosnek. 7 people jumped out of the vehicle and survived with injuries. 45 others perished in the blaze. By the time the fire was extinguished, their lifeless bodies had essentially turned into charcoal. They were burned beyond recognition, making identifying the remains extremely difficult. It was one of the deadliest bus accidents in Bulgaria's recent history, and the deadliest European crash in the last decade. The cause of the catastrophic accident remains unclear, but investigators have stated that they believe human error is responsible. Many politicians from various countries expressed their dismay at the loss of life, including Bulgarian Prime Minister Stefan Yanev, who called on the public to learn lessons from the tragic accident and prevent such incidents in the future. 5. Darius McCollum. Darius McCollum's fascination with trains and buses began during his childhood while he was growing up in Brooklyn. He became so enamored with transportation that he couldn't resist posing as a transit worker and driving subways and buses that he was not authorized to operate. His first arrest came at age 15, and McCollum was arrested over 24 times in the coming years. By the year 2000, he had been put in jail 19 times for transit-related offenses in New York City and Long Island. It's probably safe to say that his intentions weren't bad, and that he may not have even fully understood the gravity of his actions. During one of his prison stints, a psychiatrist diagnosed McCollum with Asperger syndrome, placing him on the autism spectrum. But just the same, even well-meaning offenders rarely get off the hook for their crimes. While McCollum typically commandeered subway trains, he was also caught driving buses many times. One of his more recent cases came in 2010, when he was arrested for driving a Trailways bus near JFK Airport in Queens and faced up to 15 years behind bars. Understanding that the suspect suffers from cognitive challenges, the prosecutor worked out an agreement with McCollum's defense attorney for a reduced sentence in exchange for the man entering a therapeutic behavioral program. Speaking with the Associated Press in 2013, then 49-year-old McCollum said that his outlaw days were behind him, and he was looking forward to finding a therapist and moving forward with his life. In his own words, he said, "I can't afford to get arrested again. I can't deal with the jail thing. It's too much." But he was arrested again in 2015 for stealing a Greyhound bus. He took a plea deal in 2018 and was sent to a psychiatric institution for an indefinite time period. 4. Triple threat. A New York City bus driver was recently stabbed and threatened in the Brooklyn neighborhood of LaFleur Gardens in the middle of the night after confronting a passenger who entered the bus through the back door. The 39-year-old driver was operating a shuttle bus that replaced part of a temporarily closed subway line when the terrifying encounter happened shortly after midnight. He was at an intersection between stops when a man asked to board. The driver told him he could get on the bus at the next stop, but instead of listening, the man forcibly entered the vehicle. He then approached the driver, spat on him, threatened him, and attacked him. During the struggle, the suspect stabbed the victim in the stomach and the face, leaving a gash above the driver's eye. In the meantime, 2 other men got on the bus and threatened him with a box cutter. The suspects then fled the scene, with 2 of the men going in one direction and the original attacker fleeing elsewhere. The victim was treated for his injuries at a local hospital and is expected to survive, and police have released surveillance footage of the 3 men they're looking for in connection with the disturbing assault. Sadly, this was just the latest in an alarming trend of attacks against New York City transit workers. Just weeks earlier, transit employees had called on the city's leaders to provide them with more protection, including police officers and compartments, because the partitions they're currently provided with clearly aren't doing enough to keep them safe. Union leaders have even threatened to shut down the city's transit if those in power don't take urgent action. And while it sounds extreme, it's understandable considering the deeply disturbing increase in crimes throughout the Big Apple which some have even compared to the infamous violence-riddled days of the 1970s and 80s. 3. Ann Cuffey. A motorcyclist's life was unexpectedly cut short recently when a school bus struck his bike in Buxton, Maine. 55-year-old Timothy Hageman was ejected from his motorcycle when the bus driver, 59-year-old Ann Cuffey, went to make a left-hand turn and crashed into him. He was pronounced dead at the scene, and Cuffey was taken to the hospital and treated for minor injuries. Thankfully, there were no children on the bus when the accident occurred, as Cuffey had just finished a middle school route and was on her way to pick up some elementary school students. Nobody else was involved in the collision. Police announced plans to have an accident scene specialist analyze the scene, but haven't pressed charges in connection with the fatal crash as of yet. The investigation is ongoing, and to some, it's an unfortunate reminder to motorists of how easy it is to unintentionally hurt or kill a biker by not paying close enough attention to the road. But for now, the authorities are not pointing the finger at Cuffey as a suspect, and she's not been charged with any crimes, although it appears as though any alleged wrongdoings on her behalf have also not been ruled out. 2. Darrell Sweet. In the early morning hours, NYPD officers responded to a call about an injured man on Staten Island. They arrived at the scene to find 69-year-old Patrick Viriale lying face down and unconscious in the street. He was pronounced dead at the scene. Officers learned that Mr. Viriale had been fatally struck by a New York City bus that was turning onto the street while the victim crossed on foot. Instead of stopping to deal with the accident, the bus continued traveling along its route, and its driver failed to report the collision. Following a weeks-long investigation, the bus driver, 52-year-old Darrell Sweet, was arrested in connection with the deadly crash. The NYPD recently announced that the transit employee of nearly 15 years faces multiple charges, including 3 counts of leaving the scene of an accident, resulting in death and failure to exercise due care. He's currently being withheld from work without pay and is likely facing a suspension, according to an anonymous source who spoke with the Staten Island Advance. Sweet reportedly admitted to investigators that he should have stopped at the scene of the accident, according to a criminal complaint. His defense lawyer, Marian Elizabeth Campbell, described him as a dedicated public servant and said that Sweet was devastated by the tragedy. She also said he's keeping Viriale's family in his thoughts and that while nothing can fix what happened, she hopes to reach an appropriate resolution that will bring closure to the victim's loved ones. Describing the accident as tragic, MTA bus company acting president Frank Anicaro said that he had no further comment as the justice system does its work. What that means for Sweet remains to be seen at his next court appearance. 1. Tourist tragedies. It hasn't been a good year so far with tourist buses. In recent months, at least 14 passengers were killed and 20 others were injured when a bus collided with a billboard in Indonesia. The group was on their way back to the city of Surabaya in the early morning hours after traveling to a remote mountain resort when the crash occurred. Police are investigating, but have reported that witnesses said the driver seemed sleepy beforehand. He was seriously injured in the accident and had not yet spoken to investigators when news of the tragedy broke. It happened just weeks after an Egyptian tourist bus crashed into a truck for unknown reasons and erupted into flames while traveling along a highway in the country's southern region. 10 passengers died, including several who were burned alive, and at least 14 others who were injured. Those who survived were left with fractures, burns, and bruises, but they were thankfully reported to be in stable condition after being taken to the hospital. Included among those who didn't make it was the bus driver, his assistant, a tour guide, and visitors from France and Belgium. Their charred remains were found inside the completely burned out bus. Just days before, another bus had crashed on a highway and rolled over in Egypt with 19 Polish tourists aboard, killing the driver and at least 2 passengers. Thanks for watching. Would you rather be stuck sitting near an arguing couple on an overnight bus ride, or next to a passenger feasting on extremely pungent-smelling seafood? Let me know in the comments below.